I'd like to welcome everybody back to the Acres of Diamonds podcast, where we like to have powerful conversations with interesting people. And today's guest is Laura Gavigan. Laura, welcome to the show today.
Thanks, DJ. Happy to be here.
So Laura started Mindful Matters, and her mission is she helps people learn to live with more peace, ease, and energy mindfully, which when I read that, I think it actually calmed me down a little bit. So it worked.
Cool.
It definitely worked. So
I'll send you an invoice.
So before we dive into some of the topics today, so also full disclosure to anybody who listens to this, Laura and I met last week, and we were planning on recording something, right? We didn't necessarily know exactly what it was going to be, but we ended up just having a 90-minute conversation that was phenomenal. And we realized we hadn't recorded anything. And we thought, you know what, maybe there's some value here that we could offer to some other people. So Laura, before we kind of dive into some of the questions that kind of came out of that previous session, explain a little bit about what you do and kind of how you got into this type of work.
Yeah, so thanks. Let's see. So I started practicing yoga about 20 years ago, and it was reluctant. A friend of mine invited me when I was going through a tough time, and I was like, oh, that's not for me. And I don't know, that's kind of hippy dippy, whatever, which is so funny now. As I look back.
Now with that.
And yeah. So she's like, "Well, just come. You might like it." And I did. And and through the years, yoga and meditation have always been about for my head, and then my body follows. With being more flexible, and also my head is more flexible too. I have struggled with anxiety. I was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, and could never sort of settle down my busy mind. And then the thoughts go to feelings, and then all the stress responses, like I'd get stuck or fight, flight, and freeze. Anyway, so always was really interested in it for myself. I worked in higher ed for 25 years, mostly as an academic advisor and coach. And then I had an opportunity when a mindfulness program came to the university that I was working for, University of Rochester. They could use a plug, but this Mindful University project came to the U of R, and I had an opportunity to learn how to teach mindfulness. I was so interested in it and helping it in my work with college students to help them with the sort of very human, but also very unique college student experience of choice overload and being away from home and challenges of classes and social things and all kinds of stuff. So I was able to integrate that into my work as an advisor. I also earned a master's degree in counseling. So all these things really complemented what I was doing in my work. And then I'd say it was during the shutdown, I started thinking about how could I make this less of a side hustle and more of a thing in my life, because I love doing it so much. And so that's how Mindful Matter, the seed, was planted. And I launched it in May of 21. I was still working full time. And then as I progressed, it was kind of like, I want to do this 100%. And I left my full-time job. And so half of my time is teaching classes, workshops about mindfulness for whatever community and whatever topic they would like, especially like maybe compassion or mindfulness for sleep or focus or whatever. And then the other half, I work with clients one-on-one it's a combination of counseling and coaching, integrating mindful skills. So I have a chunk of one-on-one clients that I meet with, and then the classes, and then I also do some volunteer work in the community, and it's been great. Yeah,
that's awesome. And I think this is the one thing is like when you say mindfulness, right? Mm-hmm. There's there can probably be a lot of definitions that people can kind of create from that. And one of the things that you said when we talked off camera was working out versus working in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I had never heard of before. And somebody who likes to work out, right? I was like, well, how do I'll do the other thing, right? How do I also, so can you,
so I just do it backwards?
Yeah, I was like, trying to do it in reverse, right? So can you explain a little bit of like the differences there?
Mhm. And full disclosure, I heard that term when I went to a yoga class last week, and it was a summer solstice class. It was outside. It was a beautiful night, and the person teaching the class said that she was saying, "Look, yeah, we're going to be moving. We're going to be doing some challenging poses, but." This is not a workout. This is not intended for you to burn calories or push yourself to the limit or get your heart rate up. If that happens, fine, it happens, but that's not the goal. So she's like, it's not working out, it's working in, so that you're bringing you're bringing in the energy and the moment and the whatever she is saying and instructing just for yourself,
Yeah.
not for anyone else in that circle. Like when I'm on my mat, I try to really, it's weird, like get out of my head in terms of letting go of what happened earlier in the day or what's going to happen later, and then come into my head and body to experience the breath work, the poses, so that's the work in. And all of that is within all of us. We just don't always like notice it. So when there's an invitation to do that, it's such a gift, you
Yeah.
know? Like
So
that's my job right now, to work in, to work on what's.
there, so you mentioned yoga, right?
Mhm.
And are there other like concrete things that you can do on a daily basis, right? That helps you work more in versus out.
Absolutely. So many little different, like practical everyday tricks that I like to teach people, because I like to present mindfulness in a very practical everyday way. So you mentioned earlier, like the definition of mindfulness or what it means to people, and I would say for me, it means trying as best I can to be in the moment, each moment, without thinking about what's earlier or what's later, just for a little bit, to take a break from all of that and all of that, like a rest. And then, so being in the moment with curiosity. So thoughts are going to come in, and it's kind of like, oh, what's that about? And without judgment, like I can never quiet my mind. I'm not going to be able to do this. Like just, it's hard. It's easy. It's simple, but hard sometimes to just be like, all right, for 5 minutes, I'm just going to sit here.
Yeah. Yep.
So these are where the little tricks come in that you're asking about. So one is, I know you can't see my feet, but having feet flat on the floor.
Doing it right now.
Um, yeah, do it. Kick your shoes off if you
Yep.
can too. It feels like bare feet, and just, with attention on the feet, notice how it feels, and to be supported, to be held by the floor, the ground, the earth. You can even imagine like some little roots coming down to keep you even deep more deeply grounded, but yet they're flexible. You're not stuck in concrete or anything. Um, and then noticing, do your feet feel cool or warm? You can play around with lifting fingers and toes, rolling them around. You can do a nice little gentle foot massage. But when you're concentrating on that, on your feet, and really noticing with curiosity all the things, we never really do that, right? And it's kind of hard to do all the time. At the same time, you're not thinking about that proposal you need to write or the bill you need to pay or the person you need to call back. So it's just a way when there's so many things flying around you, and to be like, all right, I'm just going to take a quick break and put my feet flat on the floor. Just take a breath.
Yeah.
Just a little, as long as you want.
I,
Okay.
it's like, right, your mind's going everywhere and it just kind of brings it back. Right?
Mhm. And when our minds go everywhere, it's very human. It's not wrong. It's not bad. It's not like, oh, look at that guy. Like he's having all these things, all these thoughts going on. It's what we do. It is what we do. And we very rarely learn to do otherwise. And here's the thing with all those things going on. And we have busy lives. There's things that need to be done. I'm not saying you're like, I'm not gonna pay that bill. I'm gonna be mindful about it. It's not that. It's just that when all those things are going on, it's exhausting. And sometimes feelings come in like, oh, I have to pay that bill. I'm never going to pay off that credit card. God, I'm such a loser. Oh, my credit, da, 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 you know. And then our bodies respond to that, like our shoulders might hunch up or our backs might tighten. And a lot of times, chronic pain is associated with that inability to notice what's going on in the moment. I know now that if I'm confronted with something that is stressful, I'm not good at it all the time, okay? Probably 70-30.
I'm right there with you too. I agree
But
with
like I know I don't love public speaking, and so I know that I might like tense up as I'm getting ready to. So I'll just kind of do like, oh, okay, all right, yep, you're holding your breath, my shoulders hunched up, and just try to just be still for just a moment. Maybe a little self-talk too, kind of like you've done this, it's fine, you got this.
you. You know,
And at the same time allowing my shoulders to drop, because if I keep them hunched up, first of all it looks silly, but I'm going to be sore later in the day. It's going to hurt, and I did it to myself unconsciously.
and it's going to it might even remind you, right, of that,
Yep,
right?
exactly. So the cycle just continues and continues. So it's it's a form of radical self-care to take just a quick little break from the busyness to do that. Some people have trouble sleeping at night. A lot of people have trouble sleeping at night, and there are that grounding that you can do that too, like kind of with your whole body, like that you're laying on your bed, the ground, the earth,
Yeah.
and that you're supported and you're safe. And then bringing in some breath into your belly, like diaphragmatic breathing intentionally, that can calm our stress response.
It almost sounds like the way that you kind of described it is like living a more conscious life.
Yeah.
Like, right? Because to your point, our minds are wired to go nuts, right? Probably from a evolutionary standpoint of survival, right?
Yeah.
What's the threat that's going to hurt me next? What do I need to get prepared for? And most of the time, right, using your public speaking example, is it a threat to my survival, right? Right?
Am I going to die?
Am I going to die?
Is
Probably,
anybody going to die if I don't do a good job
right? Probably not, right?
doing this thing?
And like a lot of our stress and our anxiety is probably to an extent, right, just a matter of our own thinking, right? A matter of our own stories that we put to certain thoughts, right,
Yeah.
that produce a certain feeling. And when I remember you walked me through this in our when we talked a little bit prior about that example or that metaphor of like sitting on the stream,
Mhm.
right, and watching like your thoughts merely as like an observate from like an observation perspective. And can you walk us through kind of like that whole metaphor?
Yeah.
'Cause I thought that was really powerful the way you kind of did that.
Sure, sure. So just real quick, when you were talking about our natural reactions to things, our brains are still wired very much like they were when we were cave people. And so whether it's a real threat or a perceived threat, in our brains, we're like, saber-tooth tiger, it's going to kill my whole family,
Yeah.
And we don't want that to go away because we don't want to step out in front of a bus. Those instincts we still need, but not to the extent that we have allowed them to take over. Okay, so having said that, oh my God, I forgot your question. I'm so sorry,
The
DJ.
stream metaphor you
Yeah,
use.
yeah, yeah. Okay. So when I was saying like about your feet flat on the floor or the ground, the earth, and paying attention to your breath, thoughts always come in because that's how our brains work. It's very human, and we'll never be able to stop that 100%. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And as thoughts come in, the skill is to be able to notice them and observe them and not get stuck on it or follow them. And so one of the visual imagery things that I really love is, okay, a thought comes in and it's like, oh, thought, just a thought. And imagine I'm sitting on the bank of a stream and the thought is a leaf and it flows down the stream and I don't have to jump in the stream with that thought. I might need it later. I might want it later. It might just keep going and what I didn't, it wasn't necessary at all. But for right now, let it go. It's okay to let it go, just in the here and now. Some people like thinking of them as clouds, floating away. Some like a train is going by. You don't have to get on the train.
Yeah.
Uh, and I had a client, she said she imagined it as like a magic 8 ball. And when the thing floats up, the message, and she was like, I imagine it just sort of shaking it up and letting that kind of come out of the peak hole or whatever you would call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the example that I heard too was the traffic example that I had shared back with you with a friend of mine had mentioned similar, right, to kind of that same analogy of it's really just something you're observing, right? And you're just saying, okay, this is a thought, right? And I have the full choice, right, to do something with that thought. I can let it go or I can kind of hold on to it. And I've even I've heard of this idea too. I don't know if I created this in my own head or if I heard this somebody somewhere prior, but this idea of like a garden, right? And our thoughts are just these plants right around this garden, and the ones that grow are the ones that we kind of choose, right? Or the ones that we focus on and we
Yeah,
to, right? So
right.
so the thoughts that are going to help us, right, and that might serve us and make us feel strong and empowered. I want to give more energy and more focus to those. And the thoughts that don't necessarily serve us, I'm not necessarily just going to ignore them,
Hmm.
give them as much attention because maybe there's something there maybe there's something within that thought is going to help me some way. Right? Maybe
Hmm.
this kind of this connects nicely to how we were also talking about toxic positivity.
Yeah,
Those
yeah.
negative thoughts kind of come in, right? And
I
how
really like that garden imagery, and I like too that you didn't immediately yank out the weeds, because you don't know, there might be something there.
yeah,
Um, and mindfulness helps find a space between a response and a reaction. Like we don't, every time we have a thought, we don't always have to go straight to doing something about it. Like, oh, that guy cut me off in traffic. I'm going to tailgate. I'm going to do this now. I'm going to tailgate him. I'll show him. Just, an example of someone who learned to drive in New Jersey. And
yep,
and I've learned like, okay, yeah, that guy cut me off. Ugh, that made me mad, but I don't have to do anything with that. And in fact, I can take it a step further and think to myself, I've accidentally cut people off before. It doesn't mean it was intentional. Just like me, he's in a hurry to get somewhere and didn't see me in his rearview mirror, like introducing other stories. And then it kind of takes down that fight response, that anger to do something that is not going to be helpful, right?
so
Yeah.
have you ever, and this is something that I think I just recently started to do more of as I started to, I think, try to become more empathetic,
Mhm.
as being empathetic not only towards myself and others, right, is an endless game, right? It's a whole journey. Do you ever try to consciously put yourself in somebody else's shoes to better understand why they may have cut you off or why they may have said that, and which then helps kind of control your response back to them?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's always possible, but something like that for sure. Like that, yeah, I've been there. Because
Mhm.
that's the thing with empathy. It's like, oh, I know how that is. I've been there. I've felt that.
Yes.
Um, as opposed to sympathy, which is like, oh, you poor thing, and then I keep going.
They,
The,
they just
the
keep,
empathy part is, oh, I know how that feels. I remember that happened to me, and like, you okay? Or, I mean, not the guy, not the traffic one's maybe not a good example of that. Um, Maybe somebody in your family, like they failed an exam,
mhm.
you know, and instead of brushing it off and like, oh, you'll do better next time. It's no big deal. Or, oh, you poor baby. Here, let me make you some ice cream. That the extra layer with empathy is being able to, oh, and I remember failing a test one time and it doesn't feel good. It's kind of painful. It's
Yep.
real. like, do you want to talk about it? Do you want to sit? Do you want some ice cream? But
Yeah,
that's the difference, right? But I do think we have to be careful with putting ourselves in others' shoes um, when people have had experiences that there's no way that we could understand how that feels.
great point. Yep.
Um, And even with the failing the test, maybe there's a cultural layer to that. Like in my family, failing a test would be okay.
Mm,
And maybe another culture or family failing a test is a much bigger thing and some shame and judgment attached to it. So like I can understand how it feels to fail, but I really will never understand what it feels like to then be shamed and judged and
yeah.
punished for.
hmm that's a great point, right? And I never thought of it like that, where there may be some experiences where I can't put myself in that person's shoes. I don't know, right? I don't know what it's like to be a woman, right? Or a different race or a different religion, right? Or different, right?
Mhm.
Different areas that are not me necessarily, right? And I think the one of the things you said that was really cool was like the failing the test example. When I think about trying to manage negative emotion, for some reason, the first thing that always comes in my head is when I failed tests when I was
Oh,
in
wow. And we didn't even talk about that. That came out of nowhere.
one of the first things I say, because I think I personally connected a lot of my own personal validation to academic validation.
Mm,
Right? So
mhm.
if a test was failed, that if I failed a test, that meant wasn't smart enough, right? Wasn't good
Yeah.
enough. Right? So a lot of the times when I think about these terms of negative emotion, I'm always like a tendency that I have is I will say, how did I feel when I failed that Spanish test or that science test, right? And I think the way you described it was a great way to highlight toxic positivity of saying, hey, if you're a toxically positive person, you're going to say, hey, don't worry about it. You'll do better next time, right? Or stay positive, right? The last thing that anybody wants to hear when they,
Right?
right, failed a test, broken up in a relationship, just lost a job, stay positive. Stay positive. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Right? How
Yeah.
am I supposed to do that? So I think the way you kind of described that, right, of understanding, right, what do we really need in those moments?
Hmm.
Those
Hmm. And what can we give to ourselves in those moments, which you spoke about, giving yourself more empathy and compassion. Like, what do I need right now? What am I feeling right now? And then being able to ask for it, to go to someone trust and be like, I just failed this exam and this is how I'm feeling. And you want to go get an ice cream? That would make me feel better,
yeah,
or whatever it is.
yeah, and
Um,
whatever that coping or that coping mechanism or progress mechanism needs to be.
Yeah, because we as humans, we need different things at different times. It could be, I don't want to talk right now. I want to sleep, or I wanna go for a walk, or I do want to talk. I want to, you know,
Mm,
and no, sometimes we don't know what we need.
yeah,
But being being conscious and intentional, and staying with those really uncomfortable feelings too, which isn't easy. Like, wow, I failed that test. I feel really sad right now, and I'm worried that I'm not going to pass the class or graduate. And and those are really valid things that you don't want to talk yourself out of, like, reality and what you're feeling. And at the same time, okay, one test does not mean all these other things are going to happen.
yeah,
And that's another way, like in the moment, it sucks,
yeah,
but it can be a catalyst for, okay, going forward, you know what, maybe I have been going out too much and not studying as much as I can. Or maybe this is just a class I got to white knuckle it through and never take another one again.
yeah, and that's a great example, right, of using that negative emotion, right, as
Hmm.
you can say a positive reward, right, or a new
Hmm.
realization. Because
Yeah.
one of the things that I believe in is, right, when we have these tough moments, whether you want to say failing a class or relationship, finances, whatever it might be, at some point, don't we want to start thinking towards serving thoughts, right? At some point, do we want to get out of that negative emotion, right?
Right. No one wants to be there forever. Yeah. When I say stay with it, I mean like temporarily, not.
It's temporary, it's a temporary intentional decision to stay with it, understand it, and then at some point when you're ready, right, make a intentional and deliberate decision to look at it in a different way, right? Or try to find a different thought pattern. And this is kind of like the example that I shared. And I've made a couple videos about this, but when my grandfather had passed away, right, I intentionally wanted to just feel a little sad, right? I missed him, right? And
Yeah.
that was okay. And I was trying to understand those emotions, not only from, I think, an individual standpoint, but also from a family standpoint. And then once I got into that point where I had controlled enough of those emotions, then I was like, all right, you know what, let's think about all the great things that I got to do with my grandpa, right? Let's think about all these memories. And that's now you could say the pattern of thought I have.
Mhm. Yeah. And that's kind of, have you heard of like positive mindset and growth mindset? These different, you're speaking, I think, about both of those.
Yes. Yep. Right. So when he comes into my consciousness now, I think about, right, there's like a second of like, oh, darn, he's not physically here. Right. I
Yeah.
miss him. And then it's like, you know what? No, I had an awesome memory with him in football here, or a great memory here. I remember we used to do this. And it completely changes the whole feelings
Yeah.
into my body.
Yeah.
And that's something
Yeah.
that I think we all can try
Yep.
to, become better with.
As long as someone, I think when it becomes not a good practice is if it's like a distraction from the uncomfortable feelings. I don't want to feel that. I'm going to push it down. I'm going to shove it away. I'm going to do this instead. But the grief or the feeling of failure or falling down or like whatever the uncomfortable thing or bad thing is. And you didn't do that. You're like, you acknowledge, like, I do feel sad. I miss him. He's not here today. You're not doing that. But some people, and that's how, you know, there's a lot of thought out there about how people, compulsively shop or, different kinds of addictions. And those are distractions from, you know, something really hard.
Yeah. Like facing those challenges, right? Facing those uncomfortable thoughts or those.
Or feeling safe to talk to somebody about it, or a lot of time, I mean, when I was growing up, I don't know if you ever felt this way, but like it wasn't, oh, don't be sad, stop crying, turn that frown upside down, or like not allowed to feel anger and rage, even more rage.
I
Nice girls don't get angry,
and
nice good boys don't punch walls.
I think
Whatever.
too there was especially being a young male, right? There was a very big, hey, strap up those, right? Strap it up, right? Figure it out, right? I'm a guy,
Mhm.
right? I'm not supposed to cry, or I'm not supposed to have emotion, right? And
Ridiculous, right?
I tell people like all the time, right? Whether you're a man, a woman, whatever you want to identify as today, we all have emotions, right? We
Yeah. And to push them away and the good and the bad. Some people don't want to feel the good stuff either. They don't feel like they deserve to or allowed to for some reason. Um, but to be human is to have all those feelings, and to cry is so beautiful, really. It's a release. It's letting go of that sadness or the
right.
rage. Yeah.
I One of the things I was in a group session last week, and a lot of the conversation that I had heard was people feeling guilty for taking time for themselves.
Mhm.
And I was just kind of observing all of this tendencies that I was hearing. And at the end, I said, why do we feel guilty for taking time for ourselves? Right. It was silence, and I could see the thoughts were going in people's heads, and we really didn't know, right? We didn't necessarily have a collective answer. And I don't know if it's because we've been raised to want to give, right? To want to support. And when we give and support, we feel valued, we feel validated, right? I mean, I think that's why social media can get a little violent, right? Because it's a validation platform, really. That's what it is. And so I think when we take time to actually take time for ourselves, right? We can't pour from an empty bucket, right? Making sure our buckets are full prior to giving it to somebody else. I think that will actually have a greater impact on people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And somehow it's hard to make that connection. And taking care of ourselves or self-care, is a word, a term that's thrown around a lot. And it can be a bubble bath or a massage or, a nice meal out. I mean, that is definitely like a treat and taking care of yourself and, unwinding at the end of the day. And then there's another layer. I've heard it called radical self-care. It's not my term, but that is setting boundaries. And that is not saying yes to every project that's thrown at us or every party we're invited to or the shoulds. I should do this. I should do that because, and I worked with a coach. She would say, we need to, don't should on yourself. I love that. And every time I hear the word should in my head or when I'm talking to somebody, I get curious about it because I'm like, all right, what's going on here? Why do I feel like I should do that? And I mean, it's about finding balance and space, even if that taking care of ourselves is just sitting and staring out. I mean, like,
Yeah, there's so many things, and I think I love the stop shooting on yourselves. I think
yeah,
that's hysterical, and I've heard too, replace should with could, right? Because it's goes from a judgment to like a possibility type
yeah.
of reframe, and
It adds an element of choice to it. I could do this.
yeah, which is the same as right your curiosity, right?
Yeah.
Type of feeling with it. So,
But not that burden of, remember that story with the ant, I think it was, I think I can, you know, I don't love that. Like, take a break, ant, like,
right,
you're gonna hurt yourself.
his bucket was probably empty by that point,
It evaporated.
right at that point. So, two more things real quick. You mentioned right before this, the mindfulness training.
Yeah.
What can you explain about that to kind of help us better understand that?
Yeah, so I've been growing my business, as I said earlier, kind of teaching classes and workshops and then one-on-one clients that's a blend of counseling. And I've been thinking about like what job, what do people do? I mean, I honestly think everybody could benefit from learning some mindfulness. And I know that sounds really corny, but I know that when I'm practicing it and kind of like it's a way of being, it emanates into all facets of my life, personal, professional, whatever. So I've been learning about, I've never wanted to be an executive coach. It's not my world. But I know a lot of executive coaches who are interested in mindfulness and meditation. And so I'm building something and putting it out there to offer executive coaches a chance to work with me and learn about mindfulness and how they can integrate it into their work and or refer clients to me who want to learn more about mindfulness.
Mhm.
So not jumping into that world, not diving in, but kind of, I don't know,
Totally deep.
helping,
Yeah.
helping in a way. And I think that big businesses and different organizations and institutions are understanding that we have a mental health crisis, and yeah, we can throw money at it and we can do this and that, but in a way, it can be simpler than that.
Yeah.
You
I,
know,
I,
imagine being a CEO and you are like so overwhelmed and if you knew how to, for just a moment, take a break and take a breath and put your feet on the floor and decide how to move forward on a decision, isn't that profound?
it is. And I'm happy you brought up, you said so many things there that I want to dissect, but like the mental health crisis, right? I'm a firm believer that we can solve this.
Mhm.
Right? And I think the way that you just described is how we do it, right? Being serious about what's going on up here, understanding the right? Like I always like to ask people like how much of your mind did you use today?
Mm.
My whole day was literally my mind, right?
Mhm.
Even when
Oh,
I
yeah.
even when
When
I
you're sleeping. Yeah.
was sleeping, like when is your mind turned off? Even when I try to meditate and actually consciously turn my mind off, I think of a million things, right?
Right, because you're human. Yeah.
Right. So it's interesting when we think about exercise, right? Physical exercise is us being physically conscious, right? You could say it that way. Mindfulness is us being mentally conscious, right? And if we use both, and maybe there's even some people would believe that we use more of our mental aspect than our physical aspect, right? Why are we disregarding it? Right? Why is it something that we're not necessarily saying, hey, let's make sure we have classes in high schools about this. Let's make sure that this is something in businesses and colleges, just as much as it would be if you were on a sports team and there was like a training facility,
Right.
like
Yeah.
physically working out. So I'm happy that you're getting into that space because I think that it's only going to actually make it more normal.
Yeah. Normalize it. Yeah.
Normalize it. Yeah. So
We're
all
all
right.
human. We have our stuff.
Yeah.
Some's in all caps and some's all lowercase. It doesn't matter. Like the human condition is, I mean, Buddhists believe, the very first thing that a Buddhist would tell you is that life is suffering. There's no way around it. And so this is not about fixing suffering, making it go away, because it's part of the human condition. Okay. So just like some days are really great and energetic and some are down here, it's all temporary. And I want to be careful with this too, because I don't want to minimize, like a terminal illness. And, I'm not saying, I'm not saying that. I'm kind of talking about like, the good times, the bad times in general. I always hated when my mom said this, but she'd say, this too will pass.
My sister said that to me.
She's right. Damn it, she's right. You know what I mean?
It's kind of like, right, we were talking about the waves of life
Yes.
and we
Do you
become,
remember the quote?
well, so I have like my own personal quote about it, but I remember you had had the one on your website, but the one that we'd say is, right, the waves of life will come and go. And the way we handle those waves is by becoming great surfers, right, of
Mhm.
those waves. And I completely agree with that statement. And one of the things too I'd heard was, I heard a poem, and it was actually Steve Weatherford, who was an ex-punter of the New York Giants. He
Okay.
read this poem on a podcast a couple days ago. I was listening to it. It's called "Choose Your Heart," and it was basically very similar to how, like the Buddhists, right? Life is suffering. No matter what, we're going to experience hard. If you're in
Mhm.
great shape, yeah, that's hard. If you're out
Mhm.
of shape, that's hard, right? If
Mhm.
you're rich, that's hard. If you're poor, that's hard, right? And he went through all of these different dualities of, the really high highs and the really low lows. In all scenarios, it was hard, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was such an important thing to realize that, none of this is going to be easy, right? And we
But
can,
there's also the incredible joy and ecstasy too,
yeah,
like the great stuff.
right.
Hmm.
Like, think about some of the greatest achievements you've had. Did they come
Yeah.
easy? Right? I guess it probably didn't, right? It was probably
Well,
pretty.
maybe some did. You just happen to wake up and and it's a great day and the temperature's just right and you found a $20 bill in the parking lot. Like just, it sometimes it didn't take any work or it's just a great day. And
Sometimes things.
then sometimes that happens. Yeah, and that's great. And sometimes there's a really bad day and it's not anything that you necessarily did either. So it's sort of saying, you know what? This is the wave is about to crash, so we can't control the waves, but we learn to surf. And that John Cabot's in. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf
Well,
and enjoy the joy and ecstasy and endure the suckiness.
enjoy and endure. Enjoy and endure.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, last question, Laura.
Okay.
And I thought about this as I was kind of decompressing some of the notes I had in preparation for this.
Okay.
What's one thing you want to be remembered for?
Mm. this is, I know what it is. I'm trying to think about how to say it. There's a poem. It's a Ralph Waldo Emerson poem that has always resonated with me. It's called Success. And there's a line in it that says, to know that one life has breathed easier because you existed. That's what I would like to be remembered for, like that someone remembers me, that for whether it was a little moment or a length of time, that I made their life a little easier somehow.
Wow, that's powerful. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well, Laura, where can people find you if they want to get more mindful?
Yeah, so the easiest thing, the business is Mindful Matters 585, all together. So the website is Mindful Matters 585. Instagram, all social medias is at Mindful Matters 585. So please follow me. I put meditations up there. I put quotes. I have a blog, musings like DJ and I are doing, and you know, and if you want to have me come and help your group or organization or want to work together one-on-one, schedule a call. We'll talk.
Have your CEOs reach out to Laura so they can all get more mindful. We can solve
It will have a positive impact on your life. It will. And I know because it has on mine.
Yes, it has on mine as well. It's genuinely changed my life, and it's made me really think about more of why we're here, right? More about living, more about connecting, and more about, as you said, right? Somebody else is going to be happy that we took the time to maybe do this.
Got a little nugget out of it somewhere.
A little nugget out of it. Well, thank you so much today, Laura, for your time.
Thank you, DJ. I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me.
And thank you to my mom who made the connection. Shout out Denise Ligori. Thank you very much, Mom.
Shout out to Denise. Shout out to Doug Ligori. Just shout out to the Ligoris.
Shout out to the family. All right, and that is a wrap. The Acres Diamonds podcast today, where we have powerful conversations with interesting people. Laura Gavigan, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you.